They left as soon as the sun rose above the horizon. Unlike last time, Agelmar had not insisted on sending Ingtar along with an honor guard, probably due to the confidence in Rand and Moiraine's words. He had seemed very curious about Rand's importance within the group, in a world where those who dealt with channeling and other such matters were always women, but at the same time he had been unwilling to question Moiraine too thoroughly, and Rand was, for now, equally tight-lipped. Once Seddon was cleansed, he could afford to be more loose about his identity as the Dragon Reborn. Besides which, he would have Kalendor to prove who he was. "I suppose you've never been to the Blight before?" Rand commented to his father as they rode. "I haven't," he replied, "and I will admit that I am not looking forward to it." "It isn't a nice place," Rand said, "obviously, but it's the only way we can ensure we can set the important events to our hand. I hope I won't have to channel before we get there." "That's a possibility?" Clam asked. "We managed last time, but we did have to fight," Rand said. "And we were saved by the call of a worm in the distance, from which we were then in turn saved by the eye appearing before the passes, instead of after them. Although I should be able to lead us there more quickly in the first place, this time around." "You mentioned that 2 of the Forsaken were there, didn't you?" Tam asked, and Rand had to commend the lack of wavering in his voice. "Wouldn't that be thrown off because we are a day earlier this time?" "It might be, but I doubt it," Rand said. "It's possible that our presence there helped draw them in, and there's also our ta'veren nature. What will we do if they do not appear?" "We'll stay at the Eye," Rand decided after only a moment of thought, "and wait for them." Tam nodded, and they continued riding in silence. It was shortly after that they reached the boundary of the Blight, marked by a series of towers, each on top of a hill. They were built to allow a small force to hold out against an overwhelming force for as long as possible, and contained both mirrors which could signal using the sun, as well as bonfires that could be lit. A small border post next to the road, still proclaiming this was where Shienar bordered Malkier, was the only other marker. A shiver went through Rand as they passed it, like the air was colder here. But that was all that showed they were now in the Blight. "Is this it?" Matt asked. "It doesn't look any different." "But not here, it doesn't," Lan said. "And please remember not to touch anything," Moiraine warned. "Even flowers or leaves can be deadly here. There's a little thing called a stick that likes to hide where the leaves are thickest, looking like its name, waiting for something to touch it. When something does, it bites. But not poison. The juice begins to digest the stick's prey for it. The only thing that can save you is to cut off the arm or leg that was bitten. But a stick won't bite unless you touch it. Other things in the Blight will." There seemed to be little change from moment to moment as they rode through the forests, but the temperature of the air increased steadily, as Rand, who was watching for it, noticed quickly. "It feels wrong," Nynaeve commented after egwene pointed it out. Indeed, they began to take off layer after layer of clothing while traveling, until they were nothing but summer clothes in a land where spring had so far refused to come. The sun had by now swollen to a red ball, and the air had grown as damp as it was hot, making it difficult to sweat off the heat. For others, that was, both Rand and Moiraine had fallen back on the ancient trick that allowed them to ignore uncomfortable weather, as had been passed down the Aes Sedai from all the way back in the Age of Legends, where Rand had originally picked it up. Indeed, despite the dry ground, it felt as if they were traveling through a swamp. Rand was also the first to spot the way in which the Blight twisted the plant growth. Here and there, plants would have leaves, unlike their counterparts in Shienar. But those leaves contained sickly yellow colors and black flecks of disease. Matt expressed his disgust when he noticed himself. Perrin, on the other hand, was surprisingly unmoved, a trait that originated from his wolf brother nature. Wolf brothers, like all wolves, hated the shadow with a passion, and little satisfied them more than to fight it. Sometimes, at least for wolves, even at the cost of their own lives. "This is the Blight?" he asked. "Just the fringe," Lan replied grimly. Indeed, the further they rode, the worse the corruption became. Trees had more and more leaves, but they were twisted, yellow, black, and red. Bloated, overripe fruit in sickly colors hung from the trees, and even leaves took on that appearance from time to time. Rot seemed to be everywhere, and the stench of decay was fighting the taste of spoiled meat with every breath. Matt was affected the worst, leaning out of his saddle to empty his stomach, then repeating that several times in the next hours despite having nothing left to lose. Egwene and Nynaeve only did marginally better. The others, including Tom, were more able to keep themselves under control, including, once again, Perrin. He and Loyal seemed more concerned with the affront to nature that the blight was than its sickening effects on all of them. "I'll be glad when we're out of here," Matt muttered at some point. "We won't have to journey back after we've been to the Eye," Rand said. "We can simply travel across the continent by gateway to get our affairs in order. This time next week, we'll be in Tyr, where it might be almost as hot and damp as here, but at least an apple tree is unlikely to bite your hand off. The longer we are away from home, the more I start thinking it's the best place to be." Rand laughed. "The unknown is always a draw, but we were quite lucky with where we were born, or, in my case, with where the person who found me lived." In the evening, they camped on a bare hill, the same spot Rand remembered from last time around, with the ruins of the 7 towers of Malkia's fallen capital visible in the distance, and nearby the string of lakes that were deceptively normal until the surface was disturbed and a gigantic mass of tentacles appeared. At least such displays helped scare Matt into not doing anything stupid. And tomorrow would be the big day. They would have to kill 3 Forsaken that day, or Rand might not be able to cleanse Sedin for weeks or even months longer, although perhaps the White Tower could help out if that came to pass. Siwan Sanchez strode forward in all her regal amyrlin seatness to welcome the rather early arrival of Elaida, the daughter heir of Andor, the false dragon, the Aes Sedai guards of that false dragon, and of course everyone else accompanying them. Daughter. She was in the courtyard of the White Tower, and sisters were streaming in, all of them no doubt curious how they could be here already. "Mother," Elaida responded coolly. "You are several weeks early," Siwan noted. Implausibly early, in fact. Although she refused to reveal how, Moiraine Sedai has rediscovered the weave for traveling and brought us almost all the way here. Siwan almost lost her composure at that revelation. She would have loved to respond with some ridiculous fishing-themed saying to throw out, but it seemed as if she was too shocked to make one up on the spot, as she usually did. No one would dare call her out on it after all. "That is unbelievable," she settled on eventually. "Did she teach you?" "No," Elaida said sourly, although she said she was willing to share the knowledge once she has more time. "I will speak to her about it soon," Siwan said. She was going to have words with Moiraine. And if she could travel, then why was she and the Dragon Reborn not here already? She turned to the Aes Sedai who were watching over Logain. "Take the false dragon to the dungeons. Keep him shielded. You know what to do. We will not quite perform his gentling immediately, but soon." That surprised the sisters, although Elaida clearly knew already, but no one went against a direct order from the amyrlin seat. Confident they would do as she told them, Siwan turned back to Elaida. "Daughter, you will join me in my office to discuss certain matters." "Yes, Mother." Elaida clearly did not like it, but also recognized that they would have to talk through what was about to happen. Together, the two, enemies, at least politically, walked through the halls of the White Tower all the way to the top. Siwan invited the Red Sister in, and they sat down, Siwan at her desk to remind the woman of her authority. "You spoke with Moiraine, then?" "I did. The letter that she sent me indicated that she was traveling with others. What do you know about them?" Elaida clearly wasn't eager to tell Siwan any more than she had to, but Siwan wanted to have as much information as possible with her incredibly annoying friend throwing everything off course. "I did not speak to most of them," Elaida said. "There were 5 youths from 2 rivers, 3 boys and 2 girls. The girls are powerful channelers, at least on par with Elaine. There was also an older man, the father of one of the boys." "But you did speak to some of them?" Siwan asked. "I spoke to one," Elaida said. "His name was Rand aL'Thor, and while he was raised in 2 rivers, he clearly had foreign blood, possibly even aiel. It was his father, or perhaps adopted father, who was with them." "Aiel," The dragon reborn was born at the end of the Aiel War. This had to be him. What did you speak with him about? Xuan asked. He ended up being questioned by the queen after some unlikely events transpired, Elida said, taking the time to pick her words carefully, likely holding back significant information. Certain matters raised piqued my interest, leading to a second conversation with him and moiraine Sedai. It was in this second conversation that I promised my support for the experiment she suggested. I assume you have received her letter about it? I have, Xuan confirmed. What was your impression of this man, aL'Thor? He seems to be a natural leader, Elida said, although he does not currently lead anyone. He is confident and far more knowledgeable than I would expect from someone raised in Two Rivers. I also suspect that he may be Tavern. That particular nugget of information did not surprise Xuan at all. The rest, however, she would have to meet him herself, as there was certainly more at play than Elida seemed willing to reveal. Part of Xuan wanted to try to squeeze it out of the Red Sister, however it wasn't worth antagonizing her just ahead of the experiment that moiraine insisted on. An experiment that, by Xuan's estimate, neither she nor Elida were enthusiastic about, but at the same time she was surprised that anyone had managed to convince Elida to participate. That was yet another sign that aL'Thor, as it had most likely been him who convinced her, was the dragon reborn, and indeed a Tavern. Let's discuss this experiment now, Xuan said, and which sisters we will ask to participate in it. This was likely going to be another long conversation. Xuan saw no reason to delay matters. It would only give the hall more opportunity to obstruct her, so she scheduled the test for the very next day after Loghain's arrival. After she and Elida had picked the participants, based on how unlikely it was for them to raise a major stink about it, they had spoken to each of them individually and, with a lot of wrangling, gotten them on board and even squeezed out promises to not reveal what they were going to do to anyone until afterwards. So, on the afternoon of the next day, Xuan and 12 sisters, Elida included, made their way down to the dungeons. The false dragon's guards had been informed too, and provided the last 2 sisters to participate in the circle. Before they met Loghain, Xuan stopped the group in the hallway, out of hearing range. I expect that all of you are hesitant to participate in this experiment, she said, to murmured assent from everyone, except the Browns. Varen seemed distracted, as so often, while the other Brown representative appeared to be excited. I am not particularly eager myself, Xuan continued, but it was pointed out by the sister who proposed the experiment that knowing more about the taint could be the difference between a sane dragon reborn and one that destroys the world. With recent events and reports from the borderlands, while we can all hope that tarmongaidon is still far away, it is still best to be prepared. In addition, Elida added, I have reason to believe we may be closer than most of us think, based on things said at the Andoran court. She and Xuan had agreed that Elida would show her support for this experiment in order to smooth over possible political tensions, as they were themselves political opponents. A show of unity would emphasize that they both believed this to be important. However, Elida had refused to elaborate what exactly had been said, and if Xuan's eyes and ears had caught something, their information had not yet made it to Tavalon. I think we should have done this long ago, Varen said absently. But it is good to remedy past mistakes. Quite, Xuan agreed. We've already discussed many of the doubts some of you have when you were asked to participate in the first place, so we will simply go and see whether we can learn anything useful. She led the way into the dungeons, joining the 2 sisters who were still waiting outside Loghain's cell. They had remained in a circle with the 2 that were joining the experiment. Loghain habla, Xuan spoke, standing in front of the bars. Xuan Sanche, the amyrlin seat, he responded. Despite being dirty, despite no doubt being tired, Loghain did not appear a broken or humbled man. He stood proud and met Xuan's gaze in a way few could, despite the bars between him and freedom. We wish to perform a minor experiment, which would require several of us to link with you in a circle. Are you aware what a circle is? Loghain laughed. I am not some commoner, amyrlin. Yes, I know what a circle is. What surprises me is that Aes Sedai would willingly link with a man. You will not be able to control the circle, Siwan said severely, although Loghain seemed unfazed about that. Perhaps he had been referring to the taint, not a risk, imagined or otherwise, of him taking over. Are you willing to lend your abilities in this matter? She tried to keep her voice neutral, but some disgust tinged it nonetheless. Why would I? Loghain asked, seeming amused. What's in it for me? What do you consider a fair exchange? Siwan asked, genuinely curious what he would answer. Release? The false dragon dead. Siwan raised an eyebrow impassively. Loghain chuckled. So, not quite a free pass to ask for whatever I want. He hummed as he considered his actual offer. Delay my gentling by 2 months, so that I may live that much longer. And a nicer place to stay than this cell. So long as you keep me shielded, I am no escape risk, and attempting physical violence would merely get me killed immediately. 2 weeks, Siwan countered. So little? Loghain asked, again daring. Siwan thought. Oh! And after you have been gentled, you shall be free to go, rather than being forced to remain at the White Tower, on the condition you do not name yourself the Dragon Reborn again. Loghain laughed, more loudly this time. That will be no problem, for I now know that I never was the Dragon Reborn. Was aL'Thor involved here too? It was no matter, at least for now. Siwan had the deal she wanted, including a delay until Loghain's punishment for the second experiment, although she did not know what the point of that was. Siwan linked with the 12 sisters that weren't holding Loghain's shield, and wove a weave to cut Loghain's head clean off, keeping it just before completion. If you draw upon the one power yourself, I will assume that you intend to kill us, and respond in kind, she said. I will not need long. Consider yourself warned. I have no death wish, amyrlin, Loghain responded fearlessly. Not yet, at least. Drop his shield, Siwan instructed. The sisters did so, and she had to admit to herself that she was surprised that Loghain made no move to attack. She couldn't know for certain whether he drew upon saidin, but she did not think so. In order to join a circle, you must almost touch the one power, but not quite, she explained. I will do the rest. Loghain nodded. Nodded! I am ready. Siwan reached out, and suddenly a violent torrent coursed through her. Immediately, she brought the volume down as much as she could, although she gasped nonetheless. It was impossible to control, as if she was being washed away by it. You must seize it, Loghain said. Force it to do your bidding. Siwan's upbringing had left her too practical to ignore the words of the expert, no matter how ridiculous it sounded, and indeed, after a few seconds, she managed to take control of the trickle of saidin, while simultaneously surrendering herself to the sadar from herself and the 12 other sisters. It feels so strange, Siwan noted. And you are impressively strong, she said, looking again at the false dragon. He was far ahead of any Aes Sedai Siwan had ever met in power. No wonder they had needed so many sisters to contain him. Loghain merely smirked at the compliment. Meanwhile, Siwan added the last 2 sisters to the circle, something that was now possible. She spent a heartbeat marveling at that. In fact, 15 sisters combining their power, something that had not happened in thousands of years. Do you feel the taint, mother? Vedin asked. Do! Siwan had to admit to herself that she needed a moment to find it in saidin's raging torrent. When she did, however, it is unmistakable, she said. It feels disgusting and unnatural, like I have only experienced when I traveled to the Blight. A film of wrongness over something that otherwise feels as pure as Cedar does. She turned to Elida. Daughter, I will pass the circle to you first. Once you are confident you can recognize the taint, move it along until we have all felt it. They did so, and every single Aes Sedai first showed surprise at saidin's wild flow, even with Loghain's contribution to the circle squeezed as it was, and then disgust at the taint. Finally, the lead of the circle returned to Siwan's hands. She wove the deadly weave again, ready to kill Loghain at the first sign of hostilities, and spoke up. I will release the guards from this circle. They will reform their previous circle and hold a shield ready. Logain, once more, if you show any hostile behavior, I will assume you are intending to kill us. Siwan released the two sisters, waited until the shield was ready, and then released Logain. Shielded him. They successfully did so, and Siwan let out a deep breath as she released her circle fully. "What now?" one of the blue sisters asked. "One!" of the blue sisters asked. "Now, we wait for several days," Siwan said. "The information I received was somewhat cryptic, but will hopefully make sense soon. And I will grant even this is valuable knowledge. I'm not sure what good it's going to do," a white said. "Neither am I," Siwan thought to herself. But she trusted Moiraine. "We will reconvene with this group when I say so," she said, concluding the meeting, and everyone went their own way. As Siwan left the cells, she couldn't help but spare one last glance back to Logain. His power had been immense. Would someone like him be able to square up against the Forsaken, or were they yet more powerful? And before such concerns became relevant, she would first have to arrange a better living space for him. Rest was uneasy, as was to be expected in the Blight. Even at night, in what should have been early spring and far to the north, most members of their party were bathed in sweat, and even Rand and Moiraine did not sleep properly. The following morning, they left early, deeper again into the Blight. By now, Rand could recognize the wisps of the weaves that hid the eye, allowing him to follow the trail. He called Moiraine and Lan to him. "We'll have to go off the path if we want the quickest route to the eye," he said. The pair communicated with merely a glance. "If you can bail us out if needed, yes," Lan said. Rand nodded. "Then that's what we'll do." Rand's previous visit to the Eye had seen a very short travel path compared to the standard. However, it was not the shortest possible. While several times he feared that the Blight was about to turn omnicidal, like it did the moment something disturbed it, such as a tree grabbing an animal to snack on, as had happened last time, they reached the Eye without any actual disturbances. "A remarkably quiet journey," Lan noted as they suddenly crossed the line to a verdant oasis of life. And actual life, not the twisted version of the Blight. The Eye was surrounded by a marvelous garden of flowers, lush trees, welcoming undergrowth, and a thick, soft layer of grass that accommodated even bare feet. A paradise, like the gardens of the Age of Legends, tended to by the nynaeve and the ajah. Which made sense, as the Green Man was the last surviving nynaeve tasked to guard the Eye. The giant being appeared through the trees just then. He was far larger than even Loyal, and made of green vines and leaves. His hair was grass flowing to his shoulders. His eyes were hazelnut brown. Vibrant green leaves made up his tunic and bark his boots. He was in tune with the life around him in a way no human or even ajah could ever match, as plants grew the way he wanted, and butterflies flitted around him and landed on top of him. The only thing marring the perfection was a long scar running across his cheek and temple, where his vines were brown and withered. It was the technology that had birthed beings like the nynaeve which Agenor had corrupted to create the Trollocs and other shadowspawn, in the same way the Dark One tainted everything and everyone he touched. But now was not the time to think about that. "Where'd have come?" The Green Man spoke, his voice a deep rumble. "It has been a very long time since anyone found their way straight here, not because of their need, but because they knew the way." His eyes found Loyal. "And welcome to you too, little brother. I have not met enough of your kind in recent times." Loyal scrambled from his horse and bowed. "Wow." "You honor me, Tree Brother." The Green Man smiled and put his arm around the Ogier's shoulders. "Hey! There is no honoring, little brother. We will sing tree songs together." His eyes roamed more of the party. "And a wolf brother too. Do the old times truly walk again?" "They do," Rand said, being next to draw the being's attention. "You must be a child of the dragon." Grand chuckled. "In a way, but I am the dragon too." The Green Man blinked in surprise. "So it has come again. I have feared this day." "We are prepared," Rand said. "You are certainly not what I expected from the return of the dragon," the Green Man said. I imagine you will wish to see the eye? Yes, please, Rand said. Follow me then. The green man led the way through the verdant garden and brought them to a hillside with an arched opening carved from the stone. The arch itself was white, and its keystone was a circle, halved by a sinuous line, with one side being rough and the other smooth, displaying the ancient symbol of the Aes Sedai. I will not go in with you, the green man said, breaking the silence that had fallen upon them. It makes me uneasy to become too close. Rand nodded. Thank you for guarding this place all these years. Even now, I feel the might of the shadow pressing down. You best not dawdle, dragon. I hope I may see you again. He inclined his head and retreated into the forest. Let's go, Rand said, leading the way through the arch and into a hallway that sloped gently downwards. It was wide, more than large enough to accommodate even Loyal, and entirely smooth, a relic from a different age. A soft, ambient light illuminated everything, despite its source being unclear. They walked for a while until finally Moiraine spoke up. There it is. The corridor opened into a vast, domed space illuminated by glowing crystals dotting the ceiling. Below, an oval pool filled the cavern, leaving but a 5-foot walkway around it. What is that? Matt asked uneasily as he glanced over the liquid. It doesn't look like any water I ever saw. Before Rand could respond, he kicked a loose stone over the edge. It slid down into the pool without so much as a ripple on the surface, and then began to swell, growing larger and blurrier until it was transparent and then no longer visible at all. Saidin, Rand said. This is pure, liquid set in, like can only be made by men and women working together. And it's why we are here, remember? This Saidin, all of it, he gestured to indicate the whole cavern, is untainted. This is the reserve I will need to use to fight the Forsaken without allowing the taint to get any more of a hold on me than necessary. And hidden below it are 2 important items, the banner of the dragon, which will be my flag, and the horn of Valere. Several people drew in a shocked breath at the revelation of the latter. The horn of Valere, Matt whispered reverently. To summon the heroes of old, to battle the forces of the shadow. Do remember what the prophecy of the horn says, Rand cautioned. Let whosoever sounds me think not of glory, but only of salvation. They stood in silence, gazing over the pool. And now? Egwene asked. Now we wait, Rand said. As we talked about earlier, I expect Ajah and Balthamael to show up either today or tomorrow, but more likely today, perhaps even within an hour. After we've dealt with them, I will seek out Ishamael, and then I must intervene at Tarwin's Gap. Why is that? Moiraine asked. Oh. The last time around, Shianar was dead lost at the Gap, Rand explained. I somehow found myself traveling there and destroying the Trolloc army while barely in control of what I was doing. It was a strange experience, which I still do not quite understand. Rand turned around and led the way back to the surface, the others following behind him. As he walked, Rand drew a trickle of Saidin out of the eye, so little that he could hardly even see the cord that led back to it, a visual representation only visible to those who could use Saidin, much like the glowing aura female channelers could see, around women who were at that moment channeling. He would warn Moiraine to be ready herself if it wasn't for the goosebumps that had appeared on his arms cluing him in that she was already channeling. The rest of their party seemed to be on guard, all of them, even Lan, sticking slightly behind Rand and the trained Aes Sedai. When they arrived back in the garden, they looked around carefully. Rand could not sense anyone channeling Saidin, but that did not mean much. Not only was it possible the Forsaken hadn't seized it yet, it was also possible to use a weave to hide that you were holding it, or even that you had the ability to channel at all. Both of which Rand had already placed on himself. I don't think they're here yet, Rand eventually said. Even without looking behind him, he could feel everyone relax minutely. We'll have lunch then, Moiraine decided, although she did not release the source, and neither did Rand. The trickle he was using to keep his connection to the eye intact was so minor that it wouldn't matter. They're unlikely to use violence immediately, Rand reminded everyone of what he'd explained them before. They know that channelers in this age are far weaker than in the Age of Legends and believe themselves untouchable. Hubris is one thing, all of the Dark One's lieutenants' share. The Green Man joined them several minutes in, although he did not eat himself. The life he tended to gave him what he needed, he explained. He spoke of life and growing, easing the mood among them, and the Emon's fielders in particular as they ate. Rand had already finished his own lunch when the garden suddenly quieted. The Green Man stopped speaking immediately, and everyone rose at once, looking around to spot the threat. From between the trees, 2 men appeared. Although they both wore a dark cloak with a cowl up to hide their faces, Rand remembered what they looked like. They were old, impossibly so, as they had been sealed close enough to the boar to suffer from the passing of time. Skin drawn tight over bones, merely a few wisps of white hair, sunken eyes, and Balthamel might be even worse. He had hidden his face, and it had not been exposed last time around. "We have found you," Aginor rasped, his voice like bones gnashing against one another. Rand did not waste time, suddenly drawing vastly more sedin from the eye and forming the weave of balefire. Aginor hadn't even had time to see Saidin before the white-hot beam connected, and his shocked face looked haunted for a moment as his face, his clothes, his everything momentarily inverted in color before he faded away. Balthamel just barely ducked away from Rand's second beam, seizing Saidin himself. He began a weave of his own, and Rand started cutting his threads. Then, a thinner beam of balefire shot through the air from the side, and Balthamel met the same fate as his companion. Rand nodded to Moiraine in thanks and took stock of the situation. Last time, Baalzamon had not appeared until slightly later, but he wasn't even sure what had happened exactly. The world of dreams might have been involved. "I didn't think the Forsaken would die that easily," Matt said, although his voice was a bit higher than normal. "And the others probably won't," Rand said. "For all intents and purposes, I just showed my hand. Stay here. I will seek out Baalzamon. He has no interest in any of you right now, so the danger should be gone." "Be careful," Moiraine said. "I will," Rand promised, before weaving a gateway to the top of the hill on the side of which the eye was found. The other side was a cliff, the same that had cut off Rand's flight from Aginor the last time around, and had marked the edge of the Green Man's garden. That time, he had been looking merely to get away, not even realizing when Aginor burned himself out in an attempt to draw more and more from the eye, and it had put him at Tarwin's Gap. From there, he had ended up fighting Baalzamon, almost certainly in the world of dreams. He looked out over the cliff, a dark vista of the mountains of doom ahead of him, jagged and unyielding black peaks that were too corrupted to host even the twisted imitation of life that the Blight did. It seemed likely to Rand that Ishamael had noticed his use of balefire, and that might draw him out. He traveled to a barren peak ahead of him, a flank of the true Mountains of Doom, and waited, looking around. In the next few minutes, Rand wondered if he had to travel all the way to Sheol Ghul to get Ishamael to come out. He did believe himself to be the Dark One, after all. He wasn't sure if he liked to take that much risk. While the seals were severely weakened, they did still hold back some of the Dark One's influence, and fighting at Sheol Ghul might damage them further. Thankfully, Baalzamon appeared a few dozen yards away, traveling with the true power, a method that could only transport oneself and seemed to distort reality. He looked as he had in Rand's dreams. Unlike Aginor and Balthamel, his appearance was that of a normal, good-looking man at first glance. He wore expensive, dark clothes and a blood-red cloak, and was tall, with dark hair. With Luz Theron's memories, he was easily recognizable as Elan Moiraine Tedronai, philosopher and longtime friend of Luz Theron, until he turned to the Shadow, one of very few to have done so in complete alignment with the Dark One's true goal, to break the wheel and end all existence. However, hot flames burned where his eyes should be, and whenever he opened his mouth, flames burned there too. That was a side effect of the true power, and perhaps so was his insanity, although Rand was not quite sure whether his centuries bound by the seals, yet aware of the passing of time, had played a larger hand in that. Luz Theron Telamon, Baalzamon spoke once he had approached. Baalzamon, Rand responded evenly. Or should I say, Elan Moiraine Tedronai. Surprise flickered over his face, and Rand immediately attacked, forming balefire. However, Baalzamon was ready, and he dodged to the side. Even as he did so, he wove lightning, and Rand responded by a conduit that diverted the strike. Rand wove fire and air, shooting arrows towards Ba'alzamon like he had done to the Trolloc forces a month ago, and Ba'alzamon traveled a short distance away, attacking from behind Rand with a complex web of fire, earth, and spirit that sought to explode the ground. Rand shielded himself with earth, and while molten rock blasted into the air around him on all sides, a beam of fire shot from his hands, moving where he guided it. Ba'alzamon threw himself to the ground, only barely dodging, and Rand stopped his attack to weave lightning. Ba'alzamon brought up a hand and a shield diverted the strike, but more. Arrows of fire shot forth from Rand's fingers. Against this, too, the shield held, but Ba'alzamon was on the back foot with no time to stand up or travel away. Rand wove air and earth, and a rock 2 yards across released itself from the hillside, swept through the air as it gained speed, and impacted the ground where Ba'alzamon had been only a moment before. Rand twisted immediately, and a ball of fire shot out of his hands, accelerated by air, and it exploded into Ba'alzamon's new position before he had time to react. The flames disappeared after only a moment, although some hardy, corrupted weeds were still smoldering, and revealed a charred husk of a body, barely more than blackened bone and some bits of stinking, burned flesh. Rand approached and inspected the remains, although there was little need. Ishamael would be back, as Rand hadn't had time to weave the complicated web of balefire, but this would buy time, enough time. Rand wove a gateway, and was glad to find that the weave took, leaving a location required familiarity with it, and his previous arrival through a gateway combined with the intense fight while he was there appeared to have been sufficient. He stepped through, finding himself in a rather similar location to where he was. Here, too, the mountains of doom rose high, but in front of him there was a broad pass. There, 200 yards away, stood a mass of Trollocs, thousands or perhaps more than 10,000 in number, their forces flowing up onto the slopes of the mountains. Hundreds of Fades accompanied them, and Dragkar swept through the skies on their large, leathery wings. Behind Rand stood the forces of Shienar, dwarfed by their opponents, yet determined to defend mankind against the shadow. The battle, no doubt, had been just about to begin. Rand formed a flaming sword in his hand, like he had done so many times before he'd received formal training in the One Power, when it was one of the few weaves he knew how to perform, and raised it high above him. Both sides noticed him at around the same time and watched in confusion. Then Rand channeled, and Trollocs died. Waves of fire shot out of his sword, rolling across the blasted land as they grew and widened. He stomped his foot, and the earth itself moved, waves traveling towards the Dark One's army and growing in size to consume them. Blossoms of fire exploded between the Trollocs, and a lightning strike fell. A Dragkar. A second followed moments after, and then they shot down from the sky in a rhythm faster than one could count, their harsh claps melting together. The Murderer pointed to Rand, ordered their troops to strike him down, only to be set on fire, consumed by earth, or electrocuted by lightning. And Saidin, pure, clean Saidin, coursed through Rand for the first time in more than a month as he wove beautiful destruction against the forces of the Dark One. The light would know victory on this day. Thousands of shadowspawn were vanquished in mere minutes, and when the flow from the eye started to weaken, Rand ended his onslaught. He turned around, facing the Shienaran army that had been watching in astonishment, raised his sword in a salute, and traveled back to the Green Man's garden.